humanity entered the wider galaxy with hope and caution. For centuries, people on Earth had imagined life beyond their sky. When the first stable gates opened and human ships reached nearby systems, celebrations filled cities across the planet. Scientists, workers, and soldiers believed this was the start of shared growth. Early contact seemed peaceful. Many alien nations welcomed trade, data exchange, and limited travel. Yet beneath polite words, humanity was watched closely. To older species, humans were strange. They were young, loud, and emotional. They argued often but united quickly when threatened. Their technology grew fast, powered by trial, failure, and stubborn effort. Some galactic powers respected this pace. Others feared it. A few saw opportunity. Among them was a powerful coalition that ruled several sectors. They believed strength alone kept order. Earth, in their view, needed to be controlled early. Captain Daniel Price commanded a patrol ship assigned to the outer human colonies. His work was quiet and routine. Escort convoys, scan jump points, and answer distress calls that usually turned out to be false alarms. He had joined the fleet to protect people, not to seek glory. Like many officers, he believed peace was possible if everyone acted with care. On the colony world of Haven Ridge, life was simple. Farmers worked red soil under a pale sun. Engineers kept shields running against solar storms. Laura King served as the local envoy, handling trade talks and small disputes with neighboring alien groups. She trusted words more than weapons. She spent long nights studying languages and customs, hoping understanding could prevent conflict. That hope broke without warning. The first attack came at dawn. Unknown ships dropped out of jump space above Haven Ridge. They ignored hails and fired on orbital stations. Defense platforms responded, but they were outmatched. Within minutes, stations burned. Debris rained through the upper sky like falling stars. Civilians ran for shelters as power grids failed. Daniel Price's ship was 2 jumps away when the distress call reached him. The message was broken, filled with static and screams. He ordered an immediate jump, pushing the drive beyond safe limits. When his ship arrived, the battle was already lost. Enemy vessels were leaving, their task complete. Cities still stood, but the stations that protected them were gone. On the ground, Laura King helped coordinate evacuations. Shelters overflowed. Medical teams worked without rest. Thousands were dead. Millions were frightened. No demands had been sent. No warnings issued. The attackers vanished as quickly as they had arrived. Within days, similar strikes hit other human colonies. Supply hubs were destroyed. Shipyards burned. Always the same pattern. Fast attacks. Military targets. Minimal communication. The message was clear even without words. Humanity was being punished. On Earth, leaders gathered in emergency sessions. Footage from the colonies played on every screen. People watched in silence as familiar streets turned to ash. Public anger grew, but the official response was calm. Diplomats reached out through every known channel. They demanded explanations. They asked for talks. They offered compromise. The answers that came were cold and brief. The coalition claimed humans had violated trade balance and territorial expectations. They stated that limited force was necessary to correct behavior. Further resistance, they warned, would bring harsher measures. Many humans were shocked. Earth had followed every agreement it signed. Records proved it. Independent species confirmed it. Yet the coalition ignored evidence. To them, truth mattered less than control. Still, humanity did not strike back. Fleet commanders were ordered to hold position. Defensive systems were reinforced. Evacuation corridors were expanded. Engineer Kevin Brooks worked nonstop to improve colony shields using civilian equipment and recycled parts. He watched families load onto transport ships and felt anger tighten his chest. But orders were orders. Inside council chambers, debates raged. Some demanded immediate retaliation. Others warned that open war could destroy everything humanity had built. President Nathan Gray listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, his words were steady. Humanity would not rush into a fight designed by someone else. Weeks passed. Attacks continued but never reached Earth itself. It was as if the coalition wanted to test how much pain humans would endure. News feeds filled with loss reports. Yet something else grew alongside the grief. Preparation. Quietly, human fleets repositioned. Old defense platforms were reactivated. Mothballed ships were refitted. Factories shifted production without public announcement. Alliances with smaller species deepened. Humanity shared technology freely with worlds that had been ignored or exploited by the coalition. Maria Lopez, a fleet strategist, studied attack patterns late into the night. She noticed timing gaps and shared command signatures across different enemy groups. This was not random force. It was controlled and centralized. She presented her findings to High Command, outlining how the coalition relied on a small number of core systems to project power. Ethan Cole, a calm and patient commander, reviewed her work. He agreed. If those systems failed, the coalition's reach would collapse, but striking them would mean war on a scale the galaxy had not seen in centuries. On the colonies, people adapted. Shelters became towns. Children attended classes underground. Volunteers rebuilt what they could. Daniel Price rotated his crew between patrol and escort duty, watching morale strain under constant threat. Yet he also saw something else: unity. Civilians thanked soldiers instead of blaming them. Crews shared supplies without question. Laura King recorded testimonies from survivors. She sent them to neutral archives beyond coalition influence. She wanted the truth preserved. If talks ever came, lies would not stand unchallenged. Finally, the coalition made its final move. A formal message was broadcast across known space. It declared humanity officially under correction. Earth was ordered to dismantle major fleets and accept permanent oversight. Refusal would result in the loss of all outer colonies. Silence followed the message, not just in space but across Earth. People waited for their leaders to speak. Instead, something else happened. All human fleets received a single encrypted update. It contained no speech, no rallying words. Only coordinates, timelines, and rules of engagement. Defend civilians, disable military assets, avoid unnecessary loss of life. Daniel Price read the orders twice. His hands were steady. He knew then that the waiting was over. On Earth, President Nathan Gray addressed the Council alone, off record. He ended with a simple sentence. Humanity would answer, but it would answer on its own terms. As ships powered up across dozens of systems, sensors recorded a change. Coalition scouts noticed unusual movement but dismissed it as fear. They believed humans would fold or lash out blindly. They were wrong. Far from public channels, humanity stepped into the next phase, not with anger alone, but with memory, patience, and a clear understanding of what restraint had cost them. The galaxy had pushed Earth to its edge, and now, quietly, Earth was stepping forward. The first phase of Earth's response began in silence. No announcements were made. No threats were sent. Human fleets moved through jump space along routes mapped months earlier. Their drives ran cold and efficient, designed to leave as little trace as possible. To outside observers, it looked like routine movement. To those who understood patterns, it was something else entirely. Commander Ethan Cole stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching stars stretch and bend as the ship exited a jump. He spoke little. Every officer already knew their role. Screens showed layered maps of coalition space, marked with relay hubs, supply depots, and fleet yards. None of the targets were worlds filled with civilians. Every mark represented power, not people. Maria Lopez monitored incoming data from dozens of ships at once. Her voice stayed calm as she confirmed timing windows. Human fleets were spread thin, but their strikes were linked by exact seconds. If one group failed, others would adjust. This was not a single attack. It was a system-wide operation. At the edge of coalition territory, a small alien outpost detected unusual sensor noise. Before an alert could be sent, human drones appeared from stealth. They cut communication arrays with focused bursts, leaving the station blind and mute. Moments later, Marines boarded and disabled weapons without firing a shot. The crew was detained, unharmed, confused by how quickly control had been lost. Similar scenes played out across multiple systems. Supply convoys vanished from tracking networks. Fuel depots went dark as automated safety systems shut them down under false overload signals. Fleet yards lost docking control, trapping warships inside their own frames. Everywhere, coalition commanders demanded answers. None came. Captain Daniel Price led an escort group assigned to intercept a roaming coalition patrol. His orders were clear: block their retreat, force surrender if possible. When the patrol detected his ships, they opened fire at once. Daniel responded with precision strikes aimed at engines and targeting arrays. Within minutes, the enemy vessels drifted powerless. He watched escape pods launch and ordered his crew to mark their locations for recovery. Some officers questioned the mercy. Daniel answered simply. The mission was not revenge. It was correction. On the ground of a major coalition hub world, officials woke to chaos. Trade screens froze. Defense grids failed to respond. Civilian traffic backed up as ports closed without explanation. Panic spread faster than information. Leaders demanded reports from their military sectors, but the channels were silent. Then the first human message arrived. It was short and clear. It listed violations, dates, and recorded evidence. It included visual proof of attacks on human colonies. It ended with a statement. Military resistance would be disabled. Civilians would not be harmed. Many coalition leaders refused to believe it. They ordered counterstrikes. Fleets scrambled where they could, but coordination failed. Jump gates denied access. Command ships lost link to their escorts. Every attempt to bring force together ended in confusion. Human cyber units moved through networks like water through cracks. They shut down targeting systems and locked doors between command decks and weapon controls. In some cases, coalition officers found themselves unable to issue orders at all, trapped by their own safeguards. Ethan Cole watched reports stream in. Objectives were being met ahead of schedule. Losses were minimal. Still, he felt no satisfaction. Each success reminded him how much damage could have been avoided if the coalition had chosen dialogue instead of fear. Far from the front lines, Laura King stood before a council of neutral species. She spoke plainly, without anger. She explained why Earth acted now and how long it had waited. She shared recordings of destroyed colonies and survivor accounts. Many listeners were silent. Some lowered their eyes. They had known parts of the truth, but not all of it. One by one, neutral governments announced they would not support the coalition. Some opened their space to human logistics. Others simply withdrew cooperation from coalition fleets. The balance of power shifted without a single shot fired. On Haven Ridge, people watched distant stars flicker as human ships passed overhead. News arrived slowly, filtered through secure channels. For the first time in months, children slept without drills waking them. Shields held steady. No new attacks came. Kevin Brooks finally left the engineering bay after 3 days without rest. He sat on a crate and listened to the quiet hum of stable power. He did not cheer. He only breathed. As the operation continued, coalition fleets began to surrender. Some commanders broadcast pleas for negotiation. Others fled toward core worlds, only to find jump routes closed. Human ships did not pursue escaping civilians. They focused only on armed vessels and command assets. In one system, a coalition admiral attempted a last stand. He ordered his fleet to fire on a nearby civilian station to force a human response. Daniel Price arrived moments later. His ships intercepted the missiles mid-flight. Then they disabled the admiral's flagship and broadcast the attempted war crime across open channels. The effect was immediate. Outrage spread through coalition space. Citizens demanded answers from leaders who had claimed moral authority. Protests erupted on multiple worlds as people learned how close they had come to disaster. Maria Lopez compiled a final report for High Command. It showed coalition military capacity reduced to a fraction of its former strength. Supply chains were broken. Command unity was gone, yet civilian infrastructure remained largely untouched. Ethan Cole issued a pause order. All fleets were to hold position and maintain defensive posture. The main objectives had been achieved. Further force was unnecessary. On Earth, President Nathan Gray addressed the public for the first time since the operation began. His speech was brief. He acknowledged the losses humanity had suffered. He stated that the response was meant to stop further harm, not to claim territory or power. He ended by saying Earth would now wait for the galaxy to decide what kind of future it wanted. The response from the coalition was slow and fragmented. Some leaders resigned, others went silent. Emergency councils formed, dissolved, and formed again. Without their military strength, threats meant little. Across known space, a strange quiet settled in. Shipping lanes reopened cautiously. News channels replayed the same images of disabled warships drifting without fire. Analysts struggled to understand how a younger species had dismantled an ancient power so cleanly. Among human crews, there was no celebration. Ships ran maintenance cycles. Medics treated the wounded. Counselors spoke with those shaken by what they had seen. Everyone understood this was not the end, only a turning point. Daniel Price stood at the viewport of his ship and watched a distant star. He thought of the colony world still rebuilding. He hoped this silence meant they would finally be left in peace. Far away in the deepest coalition core, surviving leaders gathered behind sealed doors. Fear filled the room, not of destruction but of exposure. They realized the galaxy had seen them clearly for the first time, and still humanity waited. Its fleets held steady. Its weapons stayed cold. The message was already delivered. Earth had shown that restraint did not mean weakness, and when that restraint was broken, the response would be precise, controlled, and impossible to ignore. The silence did not arrive all at once. It spread slowly, like a shadow moving across stars. After the human fleets halted their advance, messages across the galaxy became careful and rare. Public channels once filled with boasts and threats now carried only short updates about trade delays and emergency meetings. Many governments chose to say nothing at all. In coalition space, confusion turned into fear. Without working command networks, fleets sat idle. Officers argued over authority. Some tried to restore old systems, only to find them locked beyond their reach. Others waited for orders that never came. Rumors moved faster than facts, and each rumor made the truth feel heavier. On a damaged coalition cruiser drifting near a dead relay, pilot Adam Turner guided a human rescue shuttle toward escape pods. His mission was simple: collect survivors, provide medical aid, leave. The enemy crew stared at him through cracked viewports as if he were something unreal. They had expected fire. Instead, they received blankets and water. One officer asked why humans were helping them. Adam answered without pride, because the war was over. Stories like this spread from ship to ship. Coalition citizens began to question what they had been told. Many had believed humans were reckless and cruel. Now they heard accounts of restraint, of precision, of mercy shown to defeated enemies. The contrast broke old myths. On neutral worlds, councils debated long into the night. Representatives replayed battle data and diplomatic records. They saw how carefully humanity had documented every step, every violation, every warning ignored. Smaller species felt a mix of relief and unease. Relief that a brutal power had been checked. Unease at realizing how strong humans truly were. Laura King traveled between these councils, carrying no demands. She spoke in calm tones and answered questions directly. She explained that Earth did not want control over the galaxy. It wanted rules that applied to everyone, especially those with power. Her honesty unsettled many leaders more than threats ever could. On Earth, daily life continued in a strange quiet. Cities remained busy, but the constant news alerts were gone. People watched the stars at night, wondering what was happening beyond sight. Families from the colonies lived with relatives or in shared housing, waiting for word that it was safe to return. Grief remained, but it was no longer mixed with panic. In a medical center near the Pacific coast, Sarah Mills worked through long shifts treating wounded soldiers and civilians brought back from the outer systems. Many carried scars that would never fully heal. She listened as patients spoke about sudden battles, about seeing enemy ships disabled in seconds. Again and again, she heard the same thought. They had not known humans could do that. Among human fleets, discipline remained strict. No one celebrated. No victory symbols were painted. Ships held position and conserved power. Commanders reminded crews that this phase was the most dangerous. Fear could lead to mistakes, and mistakes could reignite war. Ethan Cole spent hours reviewing reports from every sector. Some coalition worlds requested humanitarian aid after supply networks collapsed. He approved assistance where civilian risk was clear. Food shipments moved under neutral escort. Medical teams landed on worlds that had once supported the attacks. Cameras recorded everything. Transparency was protection. Not all reactions were calm. On a distant fringe world, a coalition loyalist group attempted to strike a human logistics ship. Their attack failed within minutes. Human escorts disabled their weapons and forced surrender. Footage of the incident spread quickly, showing how unbalanced the fight had become. After that, few attempted open resistance. The true turning point came when archived records were released. Human analysts had spent months gathering data from captured systems. Now, with approval from Earth's Council, they shared evidence across public networks. It showed how coalition leaders had planned the original strikes, how they had ignored their own laws, how they had hidden civilian casualties to maintain an image of order. The galaxy reacted with shock. On multiple coalition worlds, protests filled streets and transit hubs. Citizens demanded trials and resignations. Some leaders fled. Others were arrested by their own security forces. The power that had ruled through fear now faced judgment from within. In one capital city, statues of past coalition heroes were covered in cloth as people questioned the stories behind them. Schools paused lessons to address the revelations. Trust, once broken, did not return easily. Humanity did not interfere. Its fleets remained still. Its diplomats observed but did not direct. This was not Earth's justice to deliver. It was the galaxy's responsibility to face its own choices. Daniel Price received orders to escort a group of neutral observers through former battle zones. As his ship passed silent wrecks and darkened stations, the observers asked careful questions. How had humans planned this? Why had they chosen these targets? Daniel answered simply, because anything else would have caused more suffering. One observer from a species long ruled by the coalition spoke quietly. They said they had never seen power used this way. Not to dominate, but to stop domination. Daniel did not reply, he only nodded. As weeks passed, the silence deepened. Major galactic assemblies postponed meetings, trade negotiations stalled. Everyone waited to see what humanity would do next, and humanity did nothing. That restraint became its own message. On Haven Ridge, reconstruction finally began. Engineers repaired orbital stations with help from allied species. New defenses were built, stronger and smarter than before. Children returned to surface schools. Memorials were raised for those lost. Laura King attended one such ceremony, standing among farmers and workers. No speeches were made. Names were read one by one. Far away in hidden council rooms, surviving coalition leaders tried to plan a future with far less power. Some spoke of revenge, but their voices were weak. Others argued for reform, for treaties, for apology. Fear still hung over them, but it had changed shape. It was no longer fear of destruction, but fear of accountability. Human intelligence units monitored these discussions without intrusion. They shared summaries with neutral parties to prevent misinformation. Sunlight, they believed, would do more than force. On Earth, President Nathan Gray met privately with advisors and commanders. The question before them was simple but heavy. How long should humanity hold this position? Pressure grew from some citizens to push further to ensure no threat could rise again. Others warned that going too far would undo everything. Nathan listened, as he always had. He asked one question in return. What lesson did they want the galaxy to remember? As the months passed, the answer became clearer. Ships across the galaxy adjusted their routes to avoid human patrol zones, even though no restrictions had been declared. Merchants chose caution over speed. Explorers delayed expeditions into former coalition space. The absence of force had reshaped behavior more than force ever could. Adam Turner flew supply missions to damaged worlds, sometimes landing on soil that had once supported attacks on humans. Locals watched his ship with wary eyes. Over time, that wariness softened into quiet respect. He never spoke of battles. He spoke of weather, of repairs, of getting through the day. Sarah Mills returned to Haven Ridge to help reopen a clinic. Children stared at her uniform, then smiled when she waved. She realized then that survival was its own victory. Reports from across known space showed a pattern. Violence was down. Border skirmishes had stopped. Even ancient rivalries cooled as species reconsidered the cost of unchecked power. The galaxy was not peaceful, but it was listening. In the deep silence between stars, humanity waited, not as conquerors but as witnesses. It had shown what it could do. Now it watched to see what others would choose to become. And everywhere, from the smallest trade port to the oldest capital world, the same unspoken thought took hold. If humanity had wanted to rule, nothing could have stopped it. The fact that it chose not to was what truly changed everything. The galaxy did not recover quickly from the quiet. For many species, silence had never meant safety. It usually came before conquest or collapse. This time was different. Trade lanes stayed open but cautious. Borders were respected without patrols demanding it. The absence of pressure forced governments to face problems they had ignored for generations. In former coalition space, new councils formed from fragments of old rule. Delegates argued openly, sometimes angrily, about responsibility and repair. Evidence released by humanity continued to circulate, studied in schools and courts alike. Trials were held on several core worlds. Sentences varied, but the process itself mattered more than the outcome. Power was no longer hidden behind distance and fear. On one such world, a former coalition minister stood before a public tribunal. He admitted the strikes on human colonies had been meant to send a message. When asked if it had worked, he hesitated before answering. It had, he said, but not the one they wanted. Human fleets still held their positions, though many ships rotated home for maintenance and crew rest. No one rushed to stand down. Commanders knew that trust rebuilt slowly. Restraint required patience, and patience required strength. Ethan Cole met regularly with neutral observers aboard his flagship. They reviewed reports of declining conflict across the region. Piracy dropped as former coalition patrols dissolved and new local security forces took shape. Disputes once settled by threat now went to mediation panels. It was imperfect and slow, but it was movement. Maria Lopez helped draft a framework for shared early warning systems. It would allow developing worlds to call for help without submitting to control. The proposal spread through diplomatic circles, debated and revised. For the first time, smaller species had a voice in designing security instead of just receiving it. On Earth, reconstruction funds flowed to the colonies. New habitats rose beside damaged ones. Old mistakes were corrected. Evacuation routes were expanded. Communication arrays were hardened against isolation. People returned not because they felt brave, but because they felt supported. In Haven Ridge, fields were planted again. Children played under open sky instead of shielded domes. Laura King walked the rebuilt markets and listened to traders argue about prices, a sound she had missed more than she realized. Peace, she learned, often sounded ordinary. She was invited to speak at a gathering of mixed-species settlers. She refused to give a speech and instead answered questions. One child asked if humans were angry at the galaxy. Laura thought carefully before answering. Humans were tired, she said, but they still believed the future could be shared. Far away, on a world that had once cheered the coalition's power, Adam Turner helped unload medical supplies. A local worker thanked him, then asked if humans would ever leave. Adam replied that humans had never come to stay. They had come to stop something from getting worse. Sarah Mills continued her work between Earth and the colonies. She trained local medics and helped establish shared protocols for disaster response. Scars remained on many bodies and minds, but healing had begun. She saw fewer fear responses, fewer nights filled with alarms. Quiet, she learned, could be gentle. As months turned into a year, the galaxy adjusted its expectations. Humanity did not claim systems or impose governors. Instead, it pushed for agreements that limited fleet sizes, banned surprise strikes, and protected civilian infrastructure. Some powers resisted, but resistance weakened when faced with recent memory. In one historic assembly, a representative from an ancient empire spoke publicly. They admitted their own doctrines had relied too long on intimidation. Watching humanity choose restraint after demonstrating strength had forced a painful reflection. The admission rippled across the chamber. Human delegates listened without interruption. President Nathan Gray addressed the assembly only once. His message was brief and direct. Humanity would uphold the same limits it asked of others. It would share systems and technology meant for defense and recovery. It would also respond if those limits were broken. The room was silent when he finished. That silence was different from the one that had followed the retaliation. This one carried weight, not fear. Agreement followed slowly, line by line, but it followed. Back among the fleets, Daniel Price received orders to stand down from forward deployment. His ship would return to patrol duty near the colonies. As he plotted the course, he felt a quiet relief. He had never wanted to command in history books. He wanted people to sleep without checking the sky. On the journey back, his crew talked about home plans and repairs. No one spoke of victory. They spoke of rest. In former coalition territories, memorials were built not only for those lost in the conflict, but for those lost to old policies that had led to it. Plaques listed dates and choices instead of enemies. The message was clear. Decisions mattered. Human archives released final summaries of the operation. They detailed costs, mistakes, and lessons learned. Nothing was hidden. Analysts across the galaxy studied the reports, trying to understand how a younger species had balanced force and restraint without tipping into conquest. The answer, many concluded, was not technology alone. It was memory. Humanity remembered what unchecked power had done to itself in earlier centuries. It remembered rebuilding. It remembered the price of ignoring warning signs. Trade slowly returned to normal patterns. Explorers resumed missions, though with greater caution. Scientific exchanges increased as fear receded. People began to speak of the retaliation as a line in time, a before and after. On Earth, nights were calm again. Observatories tracked distant stars without filtering alerts. Families watched launches not as signals of danger but of return. One evening, Nathan Gray walked alone through a quiet corridor overlooking the planet. He thought of the choice they had made, to wait and then to act with care. History would judge it, but he hoped the judgment would be kind. Messages arrived from multiple worlds requesting mediation support, not military aid. Humanity agreed to some and declined others, careful not to replace one form of dominance with another. In a small border system, two rival species signed their first shared defense accord. Neither had asked the coalition for permission. Neither had asked humanity to enforce it. They had learned that stability could be built, not imposed. As years passed, children on distant worlds learned about the quiet time in school. They learned that Earth had been attacked and had answered. They also learned that the answer had not been endless war. Teachers emphasized the pause that followed, the choice to stop. On Haven Ridge, a memorial stone faced the sunrise. Names carved into it caught the light each morning. Laura King visited it often, sometimes alone, sometimes with visitors. She never spoke much there. The silence felt right. In the deep lanes between stars, human ships moved with normal traffic, unremarkable among many. That was the final change. Humanity was no longer seen as weak or reckless. It was seen as measured. The galaxy had tested Earth and found not chaos but control. And so the quiet endured. Not because humanity threatened it, but because everyone now understood the cost of breaking it.